Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. One of the deepest ways you can surrender in practice is to drop your expectations about practice. Now, I had a friend who was also a teacher, and he liked to admonish everybody that everything was just going to be neutral and bland and unexciting forever. That was just part of his thing. Don't have any expectations. Nothing's happening. That hasn't been my experience. I guess he was trying to combat California hysteria. But there gets to be a point where you have to tell people the truth about practice, which is that it is spectacular. But it's not spectacular in the way that you can imagine it before you really get into it. Right. And in order to really discover what it is, you have to drop your expectations and just be there, feeling and perceiving and relating to what is happening, whatever that might be. It takes so long to drop your expectations. I mean, this isn't something you can just sit down and do, right? There was a student who I would say, you have to drop that, and she'd go, oh, okay, I've done it. She was serious. It just doesn't work that way. At first, we barely even know what it means to let go of something or drop something or be without expectations. We barely even know what that could possibly even look like. Right? But when we start to get glimpses of presence, when we start to have moments of immersion in that, then we are experiencing ourselves without those expectations, much to our own surprise. You have some little moment when you're free of those expectations and you're just being immersed in that, whatever it is, living presence. And then you realize, okay, in that moment, I didn't have my usual expectations. I wasn't struggling to achieve anything. And look what happened, right? So really, a huge part of surrender is dropping your expectations. Your expectations are just a cobbled together something or other, made out of previous karmas, things you've read, things you've been told, things you want for some reason or another. And they're, as everybody knows, they're in your way. I mean, once you really get into practice a little bit, you realize that all the things you're striving for are really in your way. I'm not sure I have surrendered all my expectations after 35 years of practice. I'm not convinced that I have. I couldn't really say what's left, but I don't know that I've eradicated every shadow of something that I wish would happen so that I would have that experience. I'm not sure I've actually done that. Yet I know that I'm in a very different place than I used to be. But look, I've been doing this since I was 27. Right? I'm 59 now. And I'm still saying to you that maybe I haven't eradicated all those expectations. And I've been practicing pretty much every day of my life since I was 27 years old. The timeline that many of you are operating with, what you expect of yourself, not just your expectations of practice, but what you expect of yourself, is just so unrealistic. I don't really remember what it was like practicing when I very first started, the first few years or the first 5 years. I don't think that I had any like great whiz-bang things going on. I mean, later on I did, and I remember some of those things, but I don't know that it was full of bells and whistles the first 5 or so years that I was practicing. I don't really know what happened, but I do know that I just loved the practice that I was doing. And I loved the view of the tradition. And I just had this conviction that no matter what, this was going to get me that access to reality that I felt I was blocked from my whole life. People say to me, well, I feel blocked. You know, I just had this conversation with Sada this morning. And he wasn't talking about any special block. He was talking about that he just started noticing how much he was sort of in his own road in your practice, right? I felt that way my entire life before I started practicing. That's actually one of my very earliest experiences, was feeling like something was in my way. So if you all, some of you are just sort of discovering that feeling in the past few years. I've experienced it for like 56 years, basically. Right. So I guess I'm asking you to recalibrate a little bit for your own sake. Right. We have such a tightened culture. We have such high expectations of ourselves. Really, those have to be surrendered in order to even be able to enjoy your practice. Because if you feel you can't enjoy it when you're not achieving something, then you really are shooting yourselves in the foot, right? And on the other hand, there's just kind of the honest longing to be more in touch with reality, to know what's happening, to have a bigger field of experience. That's a beautiful motivation for doing practice, right? But we have to have patience, and not just for a week or a month. Some of us, well, I was patient for the last 3 hours. Once you start having more access to that living vastness and more experience of your own enlightened essence nature, then, at first it's like, oh, wow, that's so cool. But then you go through a whole horrible long period of it coming and going, almost seemingly totally out of your control. That's very painful. I found that to be painful anyway. Have the experience of having done a lot of practice and have my view really go to for like 5 minutes, or maybe like for even a half a day or something, right? And it's like gone for a week or 2 weeks or 3 months. So you kind of, at that point, something about what it is that's actually here, but you haven't yet gotten to the point where you can get yourself back to it. You're sort of at the mercy of God, or the mercy of something. You don't even know what. And that can go on for a while. Who knows how long? I just distinctly remember that happening and feeling how painful, at that point, it becomes very painful to feel your own sense of separation from that you've had some experience of, right? And in a sense, that motivates you even more, but there's no getting around the fact that it's painful. And then eventually you establish a new base. You establish a new normal and a bigger view. And your senses are a little more open, and eventually it just doesn't go away. And then you realize, wow, it's so cool. It's never going away. Uh-oh. Then you realize that you're just like at the super shallow end of the pool. Right? My experience is that after decades of practice that I have almost totally given up the will to have it happen faster. That is such a relief, because I used to proclaim from the mountaintops when I was younger, yeah, one of the things that distinguishes us as tantrikas is we want it sooner, we want it faster, we want it more intense. I was waving the banner of that for a while, thinking that was really exciting and appealing. But then what happens when it's excruciatingly slow? Like if you've told yourself, I'm in it for the fast track, baby. And then it goes excruciatingly slow for like 7 years. Then what do? You've kind of like stuck your own self, with extra suffering because you were proclaiming your fastness. And all of a sudden the Divine Mother says, ha, ha, ha. And I think that eventually, though, my experience anyway is that you get to a point where you can't really lose. You can't really backtrack. You're still not really that deep into the pool, maybe, but you have a new base. Your senses are operating on a different level. And then you can just continue from there. But that sense of panic or desperation is an earlier part of the path, for sure. And as I've been saying the last few weeks, you realize that you have your part to play, but that it's not up to you, really. Ma said this all the time. And also, it's not about, in the end, what you achieve or even your experiences. Right? It's just the enjoyment of the dazzling quality of reality. God's contemplation is enjoyment of that. That's what Ananda means. It means enjoyment of this dazzling quality of one's own essence. So it becomes more like what we would think of as aesthetic enjoyment, rather than like what our concept of what we're doing maybe at some point. I'm a yogini, I'm accomplishing X, Y, Z, I'm going to, whatever, I'm going to light body, I'm going to walk through walls. I was really fixated on walking through walls for a while. I used to lie in bed at night, like, trying to psych myself into, like, getting my hand into the wall. And then, then one time I was at a teaching with Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche. He is pretty funny, even though he's terribly fierce and dry. He said, if you're going to walk through a wall, you better make sure that you can get out. And that actually kind of scared me, because I realized that, like, in order to actually walk through a wall or put your hand through a wall, you would have to be able to sustain that sense of continuity for quite a long stretch, like that incredibly. And then if you, like, got scared or chickened out in the middle of it,
I'll just hear you one morning. I did it.
Now, I mean, occasionally it flits through my mind, but I just, whatever. Now if I really ever think of it, I think, well, it would be nice for you guys if I could walk through walls. That would give you confidence. But then we'd have a whole community of people hoping they could walk through a wall. I don't know that would be so good for any of you Titans. Well, there's plenty of stories, especially in the Taoist tradition, because they love to talk about, like, secret siddhas. About, like, some guy who's a monk in some community, and all the other monks are outraged about him because he, like, sleeps with women and drinks and doesn't act in a very monk-like way. And eventually his fellow monks kick him out of the monastery, and he says, "Oh, okay, I'll go." And then he just leaves and walks through the wall and walks out. They're like, "No, come back! Come back!" That's like a very classic Taoist story. They love this sort of like, invisibility and ha ha ha, you don't know, type of a thing. It's really not about accomplishing or measuring any accomplishments. It's about letting go as deeply as you possibly can, including and especially your expectations. Not to replace them, not to like chastise yourself. I shouldn't have any expectations, But so that you can actually feel what is there. Your expectations are the wall between you and what's really here. Anything that's part of a self-image about what kind of practitioner you are or what you should be feeling or any kind of like moaning about what you're not feeling. It's not that we don't do those things. Like I'm giving you this talk in hindsight or with hindsight. I'm telling you all the things I did wrong or all the stages I went through. And I wish I could save you from some of those things, but I'm sure I can't. But the real reason I'm telling you this is to impress on you that, first of all, surrendering means surrendering expectations so you can be present, and that this requires enormous patience. And in my case, at least, patience was fueled by love of what I was doing, love of the tradition, love of my teachers, confidence in this, whatever little I had glimpsed of reality, the understanding that it was worth everything I had to give. Understanding that the possibility that I might be in the condition that I only experienced for moments at a time, all the time, to me was totally worth it. Understanding that I might actually feel free of all the limitations that I was suffering from most of my life, just from having glimpses of being free of them, right? And seeing some of that in Ma, a lot of that in Ma and other teachers, and just wanting that and feeling this was the way to do it. So that was where my persistence and patience came from. It wasn't just like some disembodied virtue, right? It came out of, right? It's not like, I'm going to be patient. Right? It's recognizing value, recognizing that this is really the whole thing. Sada was saying during our talk today, he just couldn't wrap his mind around how vast or how, I don't know the word that you use, the thing that we're practicing for actually is. Is that something like what you said? Yeah. You start to get glimpses of, wow. Like somebody that thought the inside of a dumpster was their whole world. And then all of a sudden they're like on a spaceship in the middle of a galaxy. So it's about being in reality. That's what it's about, being in reality, all of it, as it is. Not just being in your little world. To me, that's just worth every amount of patience I could possibly muster. And every amount of let go I could possibly muster. I don't know if it'll help, but maybe when you're feeling, oh, I've been at this so long, and so little has happened. Just think of me. I'm almost 60 years old. Been at it since I was 27. So I just have this growing understanding that it's just not up to me. And that there's a wisdom at work here that is larger than the wisdom that I can access on my own. And that I can have total confidence in that wisdom. I mean total confidence. No questions asked. No pushback. And I haven't always felt that way. Like this kind of 100% sense that whatever is percolating in my life is the wisdom that has percolated in my life for me. There's just such a vast intelligence at work that becomes more and more obvious as you go along. That your protests are our individual Our individual protests, sadnesses and angrinesses with God just seem so ludicrous after a while. I still have them arise now and then, but then I'm just like, who is that little person doing that? Right. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.